My spoiler review for Terminator Dark Fate. Let's go. Hi everyone and welcome to Crisscross Media. My name is Chris and I've seen Terminator Dark Fate a week early. I was fortunate enough to see it with director Tim Miller, cinematographer Ken Sang, and the film's villain, Rev 9, played by Gabriel Luna, but more on that in a bit. I actually haven't done a movie review on this channel in quite some time. I'm gonna keep this kind of unscripted, just reading from some bullet points, and I'm gonna elaborate on certain things. And before I jump into this review, there's a lot of polarizing discussion when it comes to Dark Fate, and the film is not even out yet. It struck a nerve with so many people, old fans, new fans, and even non-fans. It honestly created this divisive discussion that, after actually watching the film, really baffles me. And I'll say this, number one, the trailers for it really sucked. In Hollywood, I feel like the marketing teams have no real concept of how to actually sell to audiences. They trend to show too much big action set pieces or punchlines without any real weight or context, and that ultimately just makes it feel flat. And this sadly is what happened 100% when I watched these Terminator Dark Fate trailers. I had little to no expectation for this film. And while I didn't hate the third film, Rise of the Machines, or Salvation for that matter, the 2015 Genesis was really hard to get behind. And when I think of the term franchise fatigue, I instantly think of Terminator Genesis. It killed any anticipation I had for the Terminator franchise moving forward, which sucked because I love the Terminator movies. I mean, we all fell in love with Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Terminator for its slow build and high anxiety feeling, and then in T2 it pushed the boundaries for what a sequel could even be because it didn't rehash the first film. It was an entirely different beast, and then after that we got other films that introduced some cool new ideas, but they were just poorly executed. And yeah, Dark Fate does borrow nods and themes from the entire series as a whole, but it does so with good execution. If I have to give my poster review, you know, on the back of the DVD there's that little quote. Mine would be something along the lines of Dark Fate is a fantastic new entry in the Terminator series and is a proper follow-up to T2. And after the poor marketing, I was really shocked I felt this way. And as many of you know, this is the first Terminator film that has the series creator James Cameron involved in any way. And him and director Tim Miller chose to ignore the last three entries in the series as they absolutely ruined the timeline and overcomplicated the narrative, and they instead chose to only make the first two films canon, which means the first two films are the only ones that matter in the timeline. So Dark Fate, this new film, is a direct sequel to the beloved T2, which means it has huge shoes to fill, not just narratively, but to a fan base that has been cheering for Arnold and Sarah Connor for over 30 years. Now, for those who do not want spoilers, I'd skip to this time code on the screen, but that's basically where the video is going to end. I'm just going to be talking about spoilers. There's a lot to unpack here, but I will warn you, if you don't want the big reveals to be ruined for yourself, you might want to click away right now. Let me just kind of run through the story and then we can break it down from there. The film starts in 1999, which is 3 years after Terminator 2, and we see a young Sarah Connor and John on a beach in, I believe, is Guatemala. And this scene, this is some of the best de-aging I've ever seen in a film. Easily. I mean, the Marvel films have come close with some characters, even Gemini Man, but there's always this deadness in the eyes, the uncanny valley. But this was freaky real in the best way. Sarah Connor looked like Sarah Connor. John and Arnold Schwarzenegger looked like they did in the early 90s. And yes, we see a young Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I'm sitting there trying to understand how he's back in this scene, as he famously sacrificed himself in the previous film to kill the last of the Skynet technology. So as I'm sitting there kind of thinking, what's going on? Who is this? The same Terminator? Is this a new Terminator? Boom, John Connor gets blasted away, literally gunned down by Arnold Schwarzenegger. We cut to Sarah's reaction, and then we cut to black, and the film essentially starts from there. And so I love this. I didn't see it coming from a mile away. I heard Eddie Furlong was in the film, but not like this. And I know this scene, this choice to do this, will ultimately divide the fan base. John Connor is a staple for these films. He's the symbolic savior of humanity, but that's fine. If we're going to continue, we don't need a constant rehash. We've already done this with 3 other films, and with Skynet gone, it makes sense his future would no longer have the same meaning. And after I spoke with the director afterwards, he expressed us that this story is really about Sarah. And with the arc of her character and what it takes to propel her, she really can't have a happy-go-lucky story, and not the Sarah Connor we know in the first films. She's a warrior, she's a fighter, she has a purpose. And it turns out, even though Skynet is gone for good, the future that once was is no more, there are still Terminator Arnold Schwarzenegger's T-800s coming because they sent a bunch through time to kill John Connor, just in case if one didn't make it or one died in the process. And her life is literally spent killing them one by one. And she knows where they'll be and where they're going to appear because she keeps getting texts from this anonymous source with coordinates and a message saying, "For John." And it turns out these texts come from a character called Carl, who is in fact the T-800 that killed John Connor, which was his only mission. And once it was done, he was done. So he lived out his life, grew old, and even helped raise a family. He grew a conscious, became more human-like over time, and it was him raising a family that allowed him to realize he took the greatest gift away from Sarah, and that was motherhood. Arnold, you work so well in this movie. He is useful, he is funny, he is badass. I mean, this man, he is past 70 years old and he looks amazing. Arnold is the best he's been in years. Yes, he plays the character very serious and dry, but some of the best jokes come from him, and he's insanely good in the action set pieces, which are amazing. Yes, they are over the top at times, and these shots are the ones mostly seen in the trailers and are also where most of the criticism comes from, but the thing is, in context of the film, they work. I really hate that modern movies use quick cuts and tight shots to make things so disorienting for the viewer. You have no idea what's going on. However, here, Tim Miller pulls back the camera and allows the action to play out, something that is seen more in 80s and 90s action movies. I mean, it's not perfect. I'm always a practical effects over CGI kind of a guy, so when you see a Humvee get tossed out of a plane being suspended in the air with a parachute, you kind of suspend your belief, but it still works, and at this point, you're so along for the ride it doesn't even matter. It never feels overstuffed like a Transformer film, and it never slows down to the point where it's boring. It had the right needed balance of showing and not telling, and also the proper exposition for you to understand what's going on. If I had to find a fault for the film, there isn't too much. Like I said earlier, people online were quick to judge the film a year before its release, saying it had a hidden social agenda in regards to gender politics. And while I will say that is certainly the case with some films that use gender as a means to make more money and to actually just profit on real problems that are prevalent in the world, this film never hits you over the head with it. In fact, when I was watching this movie, what it comes down to is three badass protagonists that just happen to be women. It's never stuffed down your throat, except I will say for one line that honestly didn't bother me, but I'm just waiting for people to jump on it and blow it up into something that is not necessarily that big of a deal. And it was Sarah Connor telling her story and how Skynet only wanted her womb. And there was this emphasis on how Danny will likely give birth to the next man that will save humanity. But it turns out she was the savior all along. Now, am I expecting trolls to get stupid about this? Yes. Does the internet have nothing better to do? Absolutely. Was the other 2 hours of this film action-packed and awesome? Hell yes. Terminator Dark Fate did the impossible. It made me care about this franchise that I didn't give a shit about for years. And I'm honestly excited to see where this goes from here. Tim Miller said he wrote this film with a 3-story arc, and I really can't wait to see where Sarah Connor ends up at the end of all of this. It felt like a proper passing of the torch without killing off its Luke Skywalker, but continuing what was and making it new, like one of my favorite 80s reboots, Cobra Kai, a natural progression. And as always, I can't wait for more Arnold Schwarzenegger doing what he does best.
I'll be back. I'll be back. She'll be back. I'm back. I'll be back.
What?
So when it comes out in the US in a few days, I honestly recommend it to anybody wanting a good Terminator film again. And to be honest, you can go into this movie not knowing anything about this series. You'll still enjoy it. Now, when you do get to see it, let me know what you think. Was this the right move for the franchise, or should they have just let it die after T2? I'm curious to know what you think. Did you enjoy it like I did? And also a huge thank you to Tim Miller and Gabriel Luna. You guys were seriously so nice. It was such an honor to meet you and talk to you both during the time that I did. The franchise is definitely in the right hands, and once again, you did the impossible. That is all I have for you today, and until my next next video. My name is Chris, and you have just been crisscrossed. Peace out. How did I do? I am sick. I have lost my voice, and I struggled through this entire thing. But I was excited to talk about this movie, and I hope you guys all see it. All right, love you. Bye.